Hey everybody, and welcome to the show. I'm James, that's Katie, and that makes this the first ever 14th episode of Cloud Control. Hey Kate, good to see you once again for another exciting episode. How are you?
I'm fantastic. We just 7 days into the year. We're anticipating a lot of cool things to come. I got a tattoo tomorrow. 2023 is off to a hell of a good start.
It is. I beat God of War last week. I hadn't got to talk about that on the show yet, but I mean, it's just good things right now, The new year starts off and you're like, it's fresh. It's a good start. It's going to be a good one. And you just see how long you can keep that up for, and hopefully it's the whole year. I don't know. It's got kind of morbid, everybody. But yeah, we're back and we're here for what is, I guess I would consider this the last kind of end of the year, start of the year collection of podcasts. Like there's always the game of the year show, there's our award show, and then there's our prediction show. And finally, there's this one, which is, I guess, the fourth horseman in the collection, which is our most anticipated games of the year show. So that's the topic of the show today. We're going to be going over our most anticipated games that are supposed to come out this year. So cross your fingers they do, because we all know there's tons of delays these days. So let's hope these come out. We'll go over those. And then at the end of the show, Kate and I both have brought a game to talk about that we've been playing recently as well. So we'll talk about those at the end. And one last piece of housekeeping before we get into the show today is that for those that have been listeners for a while, you'll know that we have a subscription. You can subscribe to our podcast here for $1 a month through Anchor. And we donate all of the proceeds to charity. And last year we had chosen prochoice.org/donate as our charity for the show. So all proceeds we raised last year were donated to the cause, which is fantastic. And thank you all so much for sparing whatever you can. It's, we really appreciate being able to make even a small donation. So feeling really good about that. And that means this year that we are picking a new charity for 2023 for those who choose to subscribe to our show. And so we are looking for potentially some listener suggestions of what that charity should be. So if you would like to write in with a suggestion of a charity that means a lot to you, or an idea where we should send our proceeds for this year, you can do so to CloudControlPod at proton.me. Let us know where you think we should donate, and Kate and I will make a decision and let everyone know on the next show where that money will be going. But again, thank you all so much. We really appreciate the ability to do that. And with that, Kate, I guess we should get into the episode for today, our most anticipated games of 2023. Now, I know we both have some honorable mentions as well, because we only have so many games we can talk about and fit in on the show. So before we get into our actual picks, just let me know, what are your honorable mentions for most anticipated this year?
So most anticipated is always a very difficult thing to nail down, because there's so many cool games coming out, there's so many new releases. And so I've kind of got a few honorable mentions that sort of slot into the genres. I picked different games from 4 different genres for my anticipated games. And so I've kind of got a few honorable mentions that were just I don't want to have 2 that are too similar. So the games are going to sort of represent
right
a few different games here. But for honorable mentions, we've got in the kind of Metroidvania sort of style, Crowsworn. I think I must have told you about this game. I've kickstarted Crowsworn, actually.
Okay.
Something I don't do very often, but I have kickstarted this game. It looks absolutely phenomenal. It's a very 2D, Team Cherry style kind of atmosphere, very Hollow Knight. This might be a bit of a spoiler for what actually made it on the nomination list.
Well, we all knew that was coming.
We all knew that was coming. So Crowsworn looks amazing. I kickstarted this, I think, 2 years ago, so I'm super excited to see that coming out. And shout out to the developers that have given us a crow cart, a little racing game to play while we wait for this to come. That's been delightful. Obviously, there's going to be a Souls-style game on the list, which will come up, but I want to give an honorable mention to Nine Soul, which is a really beautiful looking 2D Souls-like sort of game. And then the other one is another crab.
Oh my god,
Another Crab's Treasure.
Yes.
Do you remember that?
I remember that game. That's ridiculous.
I don't know if this game will be good. It's basically a comedy parody Soul-style game where you're a little crab with a dodge roll and you fight big bosses. It's ridiculous, but it looks like it genuinely might also be good.
I remember seeing that on the trailer and I was just like, what in the actual hell are we looking at right now?
Yeah.
But you know,
I think I owe it to myself to play this game.
oh,
So shout
100%,
out to them.
100%.
And then my final recommendation is a really kind of like heartfelt indie game, and that is, if you remember, we played the demo for Storyteller
Yes,
back
that's
in the
right.
day.
That's right. That was a cool
That
game,
kind
actually.
of,
Very unique.
yeah, very unique, sort of like a puzzle game where you have to fill in the blank pages of a book and end up telling a story. So there's definitely some interesting bits in the demo that I think you can still play on Steam. But the full release is supposed to come out in 2023. It looks really neat.
Yeah, that's a cool game. I got my eye on that one too. You know, it seems like
Mhm.
just one of those really individual puzzle games that never really been done too much before. So those
Mhm.
are always cool. Yeah, good list. So my honorable mentions, I got 3 here. The first one, Final Fantasy 16. I'm really hyped for that game, and if I knew that it was gonna be good, I would have it probably in my top 4, which we're going to be talking about. But there's
Mhm.
always this kind of question when it comes to some of these bigger AAA games, and I know like Final Fantasy 15 wasn't the greatest, even though I didn't think it was bad, but I just don't have quite the confidence that every Final Fantasy is going to be a hit to put it in my most anticipated. Even though I think it does look pretty damn cool. So there's that. Star Wars Jedi Survivor is another one
Oh
that's
yeah.
coming this year, which I'm really excited for. Not because of the Star Wars, I don't dislike Star Wars, but the gameplay was just so much fun and exploring those maps. I
Mhm.
really encourage you to play this game, at least the first one, because it
Well,
is so
it
Souls
just
adjacent.
the first one is a PS Plus offering
That's
for
right.
January, so I'm definitely gonna check it out now. I've got no excuse not to.
Exactly. No, I'm really happy for you to play that for sure. And my last one, which I purposely left for last because I know that it's one of your games we're going to be watching the trailer here for. So I won't say too much about it, but this is the Plucky Squire. Everybody, one of the games that just blew us away during whatever showcase it was when we watched it last year. So I guess without any further ado, we'll get into our most anticipated games of the year. Starting with Kate, if you'd like to introduce your first one, it might match up very well.
Yeah, so this is a debut game for Studio Possible Futures. And as you said, it is called the
The Plucky Squire, everybody. Let's watch the trailer. Here we go.
It's just so cute. Like, it's immediately
Mhm.
adorable to look at this trailer.
Yeah, it
It's
really is.
nostalgic, this like child bedroom kind of
It
setting.
reminds me of the start of like the original Super Smash Bros. When they're kind of the toys are in that living room.
Once
You know?
Oh
upon a
yeah,
time, there was a plucky
exactly.
squire named Jock.
It's just such a cool idea because I mean, you're in that storybook, right? Like the storybook here is like a top-down Zelda sort of
Battling beasts,
style game,
helping the
Mhm.
but
helpless,
the way that it moves across the pages and the like it just looks so unique.
and generally being very heroic.
And there's just so many different things going on. Like there's that
Then
puzzle
one day,
section to
he
get the
discovered
bridge. There's like a
something
punch out
rather
mini
curious.
game. Like, it's gonna go into here into some like bullet hell style almost.
world
And
Yeah.
then
And then it just turns into there's also like a whole 3D platforming section, which is just bananas. I mean, we're kind of extrapolating that, I guess, but like it looks pretty fully fledged. Like this, it reminds me a lot of Mario Odyssey in the way that there was the 3D platforming sections, and then it would become like you could go into those 2D walls. But instead of being mostly 3D with the 2D sections, this looks like it'll be maybe more of a split and fully fledged both styles, which I think is a really cool proposition.
yeah, so this Mario Odyssey is the comparison I make to this game. Like this to me looks like a full fledged like first party Nintendo game. Is like the kind of atmosphere and also the like level of polish the game looks like it has.
Hmm.
Because like I was down to play it just in the book section where you're doing like the top down cute, maybe there's some combat, there's some puzzles, you get the little bit of like the punch out mini game sort of play styles, and then he jumps out of the book and
Yeah,
now it's like a whole 3D environment and you're like, "Holy shit, like I was already in, but now like this game is blown wide open."
I agree. I can't wait to see what it ends up being. And the fact that it's an indie game, it's their debut game is also very impressive. Just to see
Mhm.
something of this quality coming from, smaller teams like that is it's amazing. It just shows like how diverse I think games can be, which is
Yeah.
really cool.
Exactly. Expect this game to be, and I'll be really disappointed. But I'm pretty confident in my expectation of like this game is just going to be adorable and charming, and it's the kind of game where you're just going to feel comfortable, cozy, and have like the biggest smile on your face. All these little things just start happening to you.
100%. Okay, my first anticipated game of the year. We'll go from an indie to one of the biggest AAA games that could be potentially coming out. But I don't care because Spider-Man and Spider-Man Miles Morales, both on PlayStation, have been phenomenal games. And I can't wait for the sequel. So let's check out the trailer for this. Spider-Man 2, everybody, from Insomniac. Oh boy.
Insomniac killing it. Like
They just churn out top quality stuff, you know? Top quality. I love the atmosphere of this trailer too. Like, you know, this dirty kind of street scene. It looks a lot more like gritty, I think, than the first two games.
yeah, it's darker than I expected, which actually interests me. Like this makes me a lot more interested to go back and play the original
I've got
games.
the sound off. My mistake.
One who could surprise
Yeah, you should. I'm interested for this game more so than anything because it's clear, like in the trailer, Miles Morales and Peter are together now. Like this game will feature both Spider-Men, and I'm just thinking, like, you know, what will that do for the gameplay? Like we see here, they're using like a combo move in this. It's not gameplay; it's a CGI thing. But you know, will there be sort of combat inputs for controlling Miles? Will you be playing only as Peter? Will you be switching? Just seems like a lot of possibilities. And then, of course.
Yeah, of course, the big reveal.
Yeah, I mean, I think Venom, it's not necessarily a huge surprise to see Venom in this game. Like, he's such a popular character that, I mean, he's going to make an appearance at some point. But to me, what's really, really interesting, too, is thinking about what other villains could show up. Because the original games, like, sure, they had like Doc Ock was the main villain of the first one, but there was other villains that showed up. It wasn't just one character in that game. And I'm just interested, like, you know, I would love to see character like Kraven show up. Kraven the Hunter, especially being reminded of him from Marvel Snap. I'm like, man, that would be really interesting. But I mean, yeah, I'm just interested for this game to see. I can't wait to see how they maybe diversify Miles and Peter a little bit in terms of their skill sets. Like, they do have very similar kind of fighting styles, both as Spider-Man, but Miles has that Venom strike stuff. So I would love to see them kind of go more into a little bit of diversifying those movesets a little bit more. And then there's the questions like, will someone get infected by the symbiote? You know, how will they improve the movement even more? Like, the swinging is already so amazing, but they've had 2 games now to build it. Like, what will the third one feel like in terms of the movement, which is already some of the best in any game? It's so exciting to me to see what comes next from this. So yeah, that's that for me. But Spider-Man looks great.
It does look good. And genuinely, like, yeah, I had kind of I don't want to say I'd written off the first 2 games, but I just didn't think that they would be like games I would ever really get around to playing. Like, it's just not as much my kind of thing. But looking at this trailer, I'm like, man, like, can I fit them in somewhere? Because like I can't do without playing the first 2.
Yeah, I mean, you could look up story kind of trailers, I guess, if you wanted to, but definitely you want to get a feeling for it.
That kind of stuff just stresses me out. But man, there's just too many games to play, and I guess that will throw me onto my second pick of the list. And this is sort of a game where I don't know necessarily how much the game actually interests me, but it's the pedigree that it comes from, and this is what would be the weirdest pick normally on my list is Armored Core 6.
The thing is,
Rubicon.
If it was made by any other studio, this would be a very weird pick for you. But because of your love for the studio, like, it makes sense that you're interested in the game, right?
Yeah, exactly. Sure. If this was made by any other studio, I would have zero interest. Like, I don't care about mech games in the slightest. Like, the only positive feeling I have towards mech game is a little bit of nostalgia for custom Robo back on the GameCube, where you could famously customize your Robos.
That's the best part of the game, customizing that Robo.
And apparently that's a big thing of Armored Core. There's a lot of Robo customization. But, like, looking back on the old Armored Core games, like, I just don't see anything that appeals to me. But that being said, it is From Software's return to the series after doing Souls exclusively for the last, like, almost like 10 years. It's been a long time.
I think it's longer than 10 years, really.
If you count Demon Souls. Like 20 years, maybe. Oh, of course you count Demon Souls. So it's been a while. And From Software is just, I mean, they're working on other things too, but I mean, one of the things they're working on right now is Fires of Rubicon. And I think I owe it to myself or either because it's good to step out of your comfort zone and try something new, or because like I talk all this shit, I gotta back it up.
Yeah, it's kind of both, right? But I think that's a good
yeah.
point about like stepping out of your comfort zone. Like I think playing games of all varieties really helps to like give perspective on games you like, even if you don't always love the variety. So it's kind of interesting. Anyway, here's the trailer for Armored Core 6: Fires of Rubicon. What do we think?
I
of
remember
this?
watching this at the Game Awards and my soul leaping out of my body briefly when I thought for a second this was going to be Sci-Fi Souls. I was like, oh god, are we doing Sci-Fi Souls? Like, oh, right, it's Armored Core.
Do you think they ever would do a Souls game in the sci-fi setting?
I don't think it's impossible, but I wouldn't necessarily bet on it.
I feel like such a key feature of Souls is the fantasy.
The dark fantasy.
Speaking of dark, look at this red vibe.
Well, that's the thing. Like, this is such a like FromSoft Souls opening, right? It's like a world on the brink of collapse. That's every single From Software.
Yeah, wow.
You know,
Get some
like,
creativity from software. Jesus, same plot every fucking time. Oh, society's on collapse again. Oh no.
But they do it in such a different way. It's great. I mean, you could boil so many things.
I love grinding your gears about this. Too bad Mike's not here too.
Oh man.
I'll grind
They
his
mentioned-
gears later on the
they
listener mail
mentioned
section.
Cinders at one point early in this trailer too, and it's like, oh, feed the
feed the
fire. Like,
fire,
oh, that's Dark Souls.
Yeah. They wanted you to think it too. You know they wanted you to think it was
Oh
gonna be.
yeah, they did. I mean, this part's gorgeous too. Like, look at this. Is like ashy. Like that's Dark Souls 3. Let the last cinders burn. Like that's all of fucking Dark Souls 3. And you get this little guy, like he looks. I'd want him.
Reminds me of Death Stranding a little bit.
Yeah, it's the big backpack.
Carrying his
he's got.
packages.
And then you're like, holy shit, no, it's Armored Core. Like, okay,
Yeah.
you let out like a breath at this point.
90% of Souls fans were like, what is this?
Yeah, what is an Armored Core?
And now 90% of those 90% are like, oh, I've always been an Armored Core fan.
Oh yeah, of course. I'm a big Armored Core. I know there are at least 5 other games, so that's something.
You know what I will say about this? Like, I'm way more of a mech person than you. I really love the design of the robots themselves that we see in this trailer. Like they're kind of Gundam-like, but they don't have that anime style, and instead it's replaced with like more of a, I don't want to say dark, but it's like, man, these things are like made for war, you know what I mean? Like they look like violent.
They do, yeah. I think that at the very least, like that's the part I will enjoy is the story and the writing. Like I don't know how much I'm gonna love the gameplay, although I trust From Software and I'm interested to learn about it. But I think the story is gonna be good. Like I've done a little bit of reading about it and listened to some interviews that Miyazaki's gone on. I actually really respect that they're not making this a Souls game.
Yeah.
They're like, no, not like obviously like all the articles after this were like, oh, like how is it gonna be Souls? And it's like, no, it's not. It's Armored Core still. Like that's the point.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, sometimes you have to change it up because you can't miss something if it always that like. And then the next time when like Elden Ring was such a success, it almost makes sense to do something different than Souls to let people's appetite come back. Because if you did Souls again, not that it wouldn't be popular, of course it would, but there would be a segment of people that would be like, oh, but I'm still playing Elden Ring. It's so long. Like I'm not ready for a new version, you know? I don't know. That's the way I see
what
it.
it is like you can do both, right? Like FromSoft has blown up so much. They've been so successful, and like they've got a team working on Armored Core, and then they've got another team that's working on like, you know, they just put up that that update for Elden Ring. They're working on something new. Like they can kind of have their cake and eat it at this point because of how successful they've been. And
I'm just
like,
not so thinking. Oh, sorry. I wasn't so much thinking about like manpower in terms of making the games. I was thinking more in terms of like audience appetite and like saturating the market. Because if you flood the market too much, anything except Pokemon will eventually go out of business or like become less popular. You know,
like we new Pokemon, but good.
All right, let's get on this. We can't spend the whole day talking about Dark Souls. Come on, we got a time limit here. We have another trailer from a studio that I love and is dear to my heart. It's Yacht Club Games, everybody. This is a project that I've kickstarted, and I don't kickstart anything. So that's a statement for me and how anticipated this is on my list. And, you know, Yacht Club has had such a binding contract to Shovel Knight, because of what they promised as their Kickstarter goals, they blew them out of the water. They had to release 4 whole DLC campaigns, basically like free, huge story missions for each of these characters for free. And they've finally gotten past that. They've also released Shovel Knight Dig. And finally, last year, we got to see an announcement for their next non-Shovel Knight project, which I couldn't be more excited for. So Shovel Knight, as people know, is like a modern take on the 2D platforming kind of, set style of games like Mario. And this is their second follow-up game, Mina the Hollower, which is a modern take on like top-down Zelda style games, which of course those are pretty popular these days. But I think Yacht Club has the secret sauce to make one of the best. This is Mina here. Just their style,
If you had won the bet we had for predictions for the year, I would be playing Shovel Knight right now, and I might be even more excited about.
That's right.
But I'm not, because you didn't win.
That's right. Next year.
So that being said, I respect the hell out of Shovel Knight and Yacht Club, and Mina looks a little bit more like something that might appeal to me.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a different style, right? Like, there's a lot of people that are way more into these style of games, and I mean, I think both of us really have an affinity for some of these games. I think back to Death's Door last year. I know that's 3D and different, but this is still like, I think this will be modern in gameplay style. It just has that retro sort of look to it.
Yeah, like it is, even if you didn't play a ton of these games when you were younger, it just feels nostalgic to look at. Like, this game is absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
For the style it was, and it emulates it like perfectly. And yeah, this looks good. Like, I don't know if Shovel Knight, I just prefer this style of game, I think, and this looks fantastic.
Yeah. What I'm really interested about this game in comparison to Shovel Knight, if I had one flaw with Shovel Knight for myself, it's that I think I would have done with some more puzzles. I really like solving puzzles in games, and the thing with Shovel Knight is it's got a great balance of combat and platforming, but the puzzles are kind of light. And what I'm looking forward to, I think that was a symptom of like the 2D style of what that game was. But I think Yacht Club has the chops to be, add puzzles into what they're doing. In this game, the style of it seems like it might have an even better mix of like combat and puzzles and some platforming. And so that's what I'm looking forward to as well. But man, I just can't wait for Mina.
I think what appeals to me most about this trailer is the movement. Like, a lot of those style of games, like, you get a lot of upgrades. It's awesome. You get like a bow, you get a boomerang, you get so many like iconic items. But very rarely is like the base movement something exciting. With this, like, she's got that tunnel ability where she's kind of tunneling under and coming out, but it kind of looks like it's telling her in a way where you feel like very fast the character.
Yeah.
And that's unique to that setting, and that appeals to me a lot, kind of like the speed of it.
Yeah, I think so too. And like the skills, like you said, the burrowing, and she's got that whip, which is obviously like, I think it might be a Castlevania sort of reference, obviously. Yeah. There's also the throwable, she's throwing axes and whatnot. And I know from Shovel Knight, there was a ton of different weapons you can sort of unlock and use throughout the game. So obviously this will have the same, I'm sure. And some of the abilities are just really creative, and they really change the way you can approach things. At least in Shovel Knight, that was true. And I'm sure that will be the same case here, so... I just love it. And obviously the music is another standout portion of Shovel Knight. It's one of the few game soundtracks that I actually listen to, like, not regularly, but if I'm looking to like, I want to listen to some game music or something, Shovel Knight's a go-to. And so Mina is I'm sure it's going to be the same in that way too. But yeah.
Well, speaking of games with good music and games that are following, perhaps.
Oh yeah, good follow-up.
We've got the juggernaut of anticipated games, and it has been for quite some time.
Yeah, it really has been.
It really seems like 2023 is finally the year where Hollow Knight Silks is coming out. Like, this game to me, holy shit, like, this is Elden Ring levels of hype. Hollow Knight. Like, Team Cherry and the original Hollow Knight is, and I was thinking about this the other day, Hollow Knight might genuinely be one of the only games I've played that I would say is a perfect game. Like, I just wouldn't change anything. Like, there's so many other games I love. Like, I fucking love Bloodborne and like Elden Ring, but it's like I have things that I would wish were different about the game. Like, they have the highest highs imaginable, but they also have some flaws. But Hollow Knight, like, it's just perfect. Like, it's just so like airtight in how it was created. Every single part of the game like bleeds into the other parts in a cohesive way that enhances everything. Like I genuinely don't know where I would start if I was gonna say like, okay, fix it, like change something.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, let's do it all again with Silk Song. And holy fuck, you're playing as Hornet this time. She's got like a different style of fluid movement, which I guess, the only downside you could say is maybe she's not as fun as the Knight is the only concern.
Well, we'll see
But
here
like,
how she looks in the trailer, but man.
Just look at her.
Yeah, Hollow Knight's a game that I played back when we were doing PS Plus on the regular, and I really enjoyed what I played of it. I had some things I didn't love about it, but I mean, they're more like personal, not like I would say is bad about the game. But it was great, and I wish I had played more. So I don't know if I would say I'm gonna jump into this because I feel like I would do myself more of a service to play through Hollow Knight first. But I'm so excited for you to play this though, hopefully this year. The combat looks great.
This game just lives rent-free in my mind. Like, just the fluidity of the game. Like, I don't think I've ever played another game that feels this fluid. Like, the way that you're jumping around and bouncing off of enemies and platforming, and it's just like perfection. And that was one of the best things about Hollow Knight. And I'm looking like the areas look amazing. Like, the art is obviously an incredible part of these games. The enemy varieties are, extreme, even just in a trailer where obviously you don't want to give everything away.
Yeah. I mean, the other game was so big too. That's the thing. Like the variety of enemies just keeps up, and it's like on such a scope as well. Like the scope is so large. I guess it was all DLC in the original, but I would assume like this is going to come out and be a pretty sizable game, at least comparable to like the original Hollow Knight size, which is not anything to sneeze at.
Yeah, I think the original Hollow Knight, and obviously this is counting like the DLCs, which, to point out, were all completely free.
Yeah.
I think it took me about 40 hours to beat that game, which is like pretty long for a game when you keep in mind was made by 3 people. And I don't believe they've extended their team for Silk Song, so it's just an astounding.
Well, Yacht Club did. for Mina.
For Mina, but I don't think Team Cherry did for Silk Song. Is what I'm saying. Like, it is insanely impressive.
And that's a feather in their cap, right? It's pretty amazing they're able to work like that. And I guess that also speaks to why it's taking the game a while to come out as well. It's just that I guess they're sticking true to what they want to do, working in their own way, and that means it takes a while. But sometimes it's like forgive me for forgetting, but it's the team that makes Cuphead. Like they took 5 years to make the DLC for Cuphead, and I mean, it's the same thing you're talking about, where it's just like everything is polished to a sheen. There's not one flaw. It is like perfectly made. And like, I think that's a good comparison to make with Silk Song as well.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Okay, so my next anticipated game, speaking of delicious art styles, I think we should just watch the trailer first and then talk about it. This is Sea of Stars. And wow, the art, this might be the nicest pixel art I've ever seen.
I was so glad that you reminded me that this game existed.
Of course, The Messenger was a great game as well. Interesting that, well, because The Messenger was a platformer as well, similar to Shovel Knight, and then this is a second game from them, but instead of being Zelda like Mina, this game is a turn-based RPG, which is a very big change. Fishing mini games, of course. But look at the animation of that giant boss and like this water and oh my god.
That giant boss, and it's like the models themselves are amazing, but it's all the extra little. It's the smoke that comes off, like the billowing, like whatever the heck that energy is around that enemy.
Yeah, and like everything moves, right? Everything has just got a life to it. I feel like a lot of pixel games can look not quite as good when they are sort of static and then just the characters move. Whereas this game is like everything, the branches are swaying, the fire is flickering, the light flickers in and out,
Right, yeah, the grass. This is the guy, this like Eldermas guy, like the smoke billowing off of him, and this boss. This is very Death's Door to me. This kind of.
Yeah.
You reminded me of when you fight the castle.
God, it just looks great though, and I really like it when studios take these kind of left turns, and a studio like, oh my god, now I'm blanking too. The studio that made The Messenger made this game. And The Messenger is such an interesting game as well. And I don't think you played it, right? But it's a 2D kind of like, it's a tough platformer. But partway through the game, and this is a spoiler, but it's an old game, so I don't care. It turns from an 8-bit game to a 16-bit game, and the whole game shifts. Like you get expanded move sets, you get the music changes, you're revisiting the same areas, but in like an upgraded graphic and music style. It does this huge shift, and it's really unexpected. And so something like Sea of Stars obviously is starting in that higher fidelity graphic style, and they might not do, like, I think it would be kind of weird if they did that same shift. But the studio themselves, they have a precedent for like, wow, that's a really shocking kind of thing to do partway through a game. And I'm just so interested for what kind of creative ideas they might do within this game to change it up and make it a bit more unique. Sabotage Studio is the name there. So I think that's a really cool aspect. And then also just, I love RPGs like this. I love turn-based combat. I think it's interesting that there seems to be an element of positioning your characters in different locations rather than just being like, your guys are on the left and the enemies are on the right. And you see moves like there's that boomerang that kind of bounces between the enemies. Like, do you have to position your characters to set that up? Those type of things. It just seems really intriguing to me.
Absolutely. I think I'm a little cooler on turn-based RPGs. I like when there's like, I don't want to use the word gimmick, but something that is like unique that makes them just a little bit different than I kind of use my move at the fight and this person's my healer, so that's what they do. And I like when there's a little bit more of like a dynamic element to the gameplay, and so that positional system could be what I need. And so I want this game to be good because I just want to see like what all the environments look like. So my hope is you play this and then you're like, okay, yeah, you're borrowing it because you're gonna love it. It is worth it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a perfect Switch game, so I will be getting it physically. Okay, Kate, what's your last most anticipated game for 2023?
So my final game is which is funny because there's a From Software game on this list. But this is my final game bringing up the Souls category for me. And this is a game where you may have forgotten that it exists.
I did until we talked about it earlier.
It's called Lies of P, and it genuinely looks very Souls-inspired.
Let's start the trailer while we talk about it, because it does look Souls-inspired.
So this looks like very, very Souls. There's so many different Souls elements to it. It looks very competent, but then you remember to yourself, this game is based off of Pinocchio and the Pinocchio myth.
The Pinocchio verse. You know, everyone's been clamoring for a Pinocchio game for years.
I mean,
you know, like, where's Beyond Dead and Evil 2? Where's Hollow Knight Silk Song? Where's our Pinocchio game?
And like, you can watch this trailer and totally forget about Pinocchio. But then totally. It's like, right? But then it's like, oh no, remember Pinocchio the puppet. But man, like, the atmosphere is cool. Like, it's really got that kind of Victorian creepy setting going on here.
Yeah, it does. I love the setting actually of this game. I was gonna say, like, I don't want to make a Bloodborne comparison because I mean it's such a low hanging fruit when it comes to these style of games. You know, like just to be like, oh, it's like Bloodborne. Like, at a certain point, there's a big part of me that's like, I wish we could have this style of game but in a different setting. Like, it doesn't always have to be dark and gothic and bloody, but at the same time this game is doing that setting so well that I'm like, I want a game in a different style, but not this one. This one does good here.
Absolutely. And look, like, that's the pizza cutter from
this game does have sort of like a steampunk element to it that Bloodborne does not. Like, it's not a one-for-one sort of element.
No,
like that,
it is not a one-for-one. It's just there's just a few things that are kind of fun to pick on. But you're right, like, it's sort of got like that steampunky kind of mechy sort of feel to it. Like, there's like robot, and a lot of the enemies you're fighting seem to be like you've got, I believe like a trick arm, which again is like, oh, that's Sekiro, but it's a little more steampunky this time.
Yeah.
But man, like, it just looks good. Like,
the font looks good. Like, look at that.
It's got a nice logo. Font. I think there's another trailer that came out that's a little bit more combat oriented, where you really get to see, like, there's really nice particle effects. Like, it looks pretty fast paced, but still grounded. Like, you're not jumping up in big air combos, which is to get a little bit
blasphemous.
Concerned. Like,
Souls fans, their throats begin to hurt when they see that. They're like, "Oh God, what is this pain? Like, you can't jump in the air like that. This isn't fair." What is this, Bayonetta? Ugh.
It's so true. But I mean, this game's got it all. You've got Lady Gehrman in her wheelchair hooked up to a blood vial, maybe like some kind of face rot sickness. You got the Sekiro trick arm. In the other trailer, someone carrying a coffin. You got the setting. You got daddy issues. It's got everything a good Souls game needs. And in fact, the tagline for this game is a time when humanity shines. And some could say that is going to be an interesting story beat this game has about like the nature of being a puppet. And like Pinocchio's whole thing, he wants to be human, right? And so like could have a Detroit becomes human kind of like, what does humanity mean?
Yeah,
like, or puppets different? Like, so you could say that about, I could say that humanity is also a core mechanic in Dark Souls.
Right, which we're not going to talk about because I have to talk about my lessons. I want to say a couple of things about this game too, because just to like this game looks really interesting to me, and you know me, like we talk about Souls a lot, I razz you about it a lot, but I'm interested. Like I want there to be one game like this, like Elden Ring did earlier this year, that pulls me into this genre, because it is something that's very interesting. I have a lot of respect for the games, and I want this one to do that for me. And you never know, like we'll see. It's very compelling. I like the sort of here's the thing I'm kind of worried about for this game, then I'll shut up. There are a lot of adjacent things you're listing, like, oh, she's kind of like Gehrman in the wheelchair. There's the trick arm. It's kind of like Sekiro. The only thing I'm worried about for this game is like, are they putting too many obvious fan servicey things in to ape Souls in a way that's like, they want you to know this is Souls so badly that it'll ring hollow? Just to bring out the word hollow one more time. You know, like, you know how Souls is so good about being subtle and like, oh, you really have to investigate and read this lore and get into it. I'm worried that those aspects that draw people to Souls so much, the mystery, might be just like totally far gone in this game, and like, oh no, here's a reference to Souls again, blatantly. And like, you know what I mean?
And that is definitely a line you can cross. Like, I love when games do like homages and references, especially when it's something that like they're clearly inspired by. I get a big smile on my face when I'm playing like Dead Cells, and one of the paintings in the background of the castle is Hollow Knight. I'm like,
I love homages and references, but this even to me, that's someone that's very base like knowledge. This is very much like beating you over the head with like, we like Dark Souls, like you know.
I think what it'll come down to is how much is the game doing unique, right? Like these are obviously like big things to put in a trailer that are cool and eye-catching and get people. And I think that's not a detriment, but what you need when you have a lot of clear, direct comparison is you need to have unique things that stand on their own, whether that's gameplay, story setting, like you need to differentiate yourself in some way in addition. And again, that's where I bring back to this game on Pinocchio.
Exactly.
Which is fucking weird. But that gives them like, you know, like that's a unique identity that they could really, you know, go hard into, that makes it very different.
That's the last thing I was going to say about what encourages me for this game, that might be the one that'll bring me in the most, is because
you're a big Pinocchio fan.
I'm a huge Pinocchio fan. I fucking love Pinocchio. No, it's that because it's based on Pinocchio and it's based on the work of this author, the storytelling style might not be so opaque. Because one of the things that I have respect for again about Souls is the way they tell stories. Obviously the stories are incredible, but for someone like me that sometimes struggles to get through the game and I don't really want to spend the extra time piecing it together while I'm just trying to not die, like it's hard for me to get the story beats out of it. And so if this one has the rest of the elements of those games, which are good, but tells me a bit more of a story I can understand without watching 400 hours of videos on YouTube, that might be a good thing. Anyways, totally. Let's move on to one more game, which has an excellent vibe, just like the Pinocchio Lives of P game. And this one is kind of for both of us, but it is one of my most anticipated, even though I know it's for you as well. And this is something we talked about recently on the show, so let's watch it one more time here from our friends at Supergiant. Oh boy.
Oh man, we talked about art and music and style in a few games earlier, but like, holy shit, is Supergiant the king of it.
So what's interesting about this is that, I mean, you see the head flowers, right? Like you instantly know that it's kind of an Olympus style thing, but
you got the same fire feet as well.
like at this point I'm like, okay, I know it's in the Hades universe at this point, but I didn't know like, oh, obviously this is going to be a different style of game, you know, because they never do direct sequels in Supergiant. So I thought, well, maybe it's like a Hades sequel, but different gameplay style, right? And as much as we've been kind of praising other studios for taking left turns, for this game, I couldn't be happier that it's going back to the well.
Absolutely. And I think it's cool. Like, I saw this and I thought it was DLC because in my mind, Hades is still relatively new. Like, you know, like I did not expect the scope of this game to be a sequel, and maybe, like you said, with the pedigree of Supergiant and just, like sequels are not their thing. That threw me off, but Jesus Christ.
But look at this combat and like the new weapons. She's got like a staff, it looks like, and those little daggers, you know.
Like it looks
new characters.
Yeah, it looks as fluid as the first Hades, but just that extra step up.
I wonder if that's how they were able to turn it around a bit quicker, because on its base, like I'm sure there is a lot of interconnective tissue between Hades and this, you know, in terms of like how it moves and the environments. Like they're not that different from what you see here. They're just obviously they look different and whatnot, but the core is the same.
Right, and you gotta think too, they probably had a lot of ideas in Hades 1 that they didn't end up finding a way to utilize that can either be repurposed or like they work better in the sequel than they would have in the original. Whether that be like, yeah, like you said, like maybe one of the weapons was considered but then dropped. You know, I imagine it's easier. It probably comes with its own set of challenges that are unique. Overall, I would say it's likely easier to expand sequel than it is to like totally build something from the ground up.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting too, like you mentioned DLC. To me, I was thinking Hades would for sure get DLC over a direct sequel, not just because of the Supergiant factor, but also just because of the nature of the game. Like, but the more I was thinking about it, I think a full sequel does make sense because so much of Hades is about the narrative, you know, and if you did a DLC, I feel like you can't really always tell a full story like that, especially in the style that Hades does it in a smaller package. And so what sets Hades apart from other like what's the game that just got the Castlevania DLC, Dead Cells? Like that's a good game to add a little package onto, like different ways to run through the game. But for Hades, in the way that it had a narrative style that was so unique, I think that kind of justifies a sequel more because you can tell the story of a new character and you know still have all the stuff that would have been a DLC as well, like weapons and enemies and areas and stuff too. But yeah, I mean, what can you say besides I just can't wait to play this day one, no doubt about it.
This is a day one purchase. I cheated by not putting this on the list because I knew it was like a shoo-in. Like when we talked about this episode, we joked, we're like, okay, so yeah, we'll have 7 games because 3 unique each and then Hades 2. And that's what I was going with for a while, but then I was like, if I know you're putting Hades 2, I can play this game of chicken and put it and have an extra game.
Exactly. Well, you got Plucky Squire on there for me, so we traded each other off a little bit. That was great. Those are fun. And man, like so many good games to look forward to this year. And those are just the ones we know about. Like these are the games we know about as of January 7th. You know, there's going to be so many showcases and things this year, games we don't know about. Just can't wait to see what else there is too. But for now, I guess we'll move on to talk about some games we've been playing as our extra topics. So I would love to hear about Superliminal, Kate, because this is a game that I've seen, and I played Maquette a couple of years ago, which is a similar sort of idea. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on Superliminal.
So this game was amazing. For context, we decided to start this up on New Year's. Me and my friends, we were hanging out New Year's. What are we gonna do? We're like, you know what? We'll play Superliminal. It's like a puzzle game we've owned for a long time. We've never got around to play. Kind of cute. And you know, we were intending to be up till that midnight, not a hell of a lot later. We stayed up till 2:30 in the morning beating this game, and we did it in a single sitting, no breaks, because we were just so compelled to keep playing. It's awesome. It starts out, and I will say this for anyone, if you're not 100% sold in the first half an hour, keep playing because your mind is going to get blown. Like it starts out very Portal feeling, like you're kind of in like a testing sort of center. There's kind of like a sarcastic and like very GLaDOS style kind of person talking to you, and you know, ideas of like this is what the testing's supposed to be like. If this is not happening to you, which obviously yours isn't right, then like, you have broken 77 rules. Please go back to sleep. Like just kind of silly, funny stuff.
And is it actually funny? Like, does the humor hit like Portal?
I think it hits like Portal. I think it definitely feels like it's trying to be Portal, which maybe detract a little bit. And again, if you haven't played Portal,
yeah,
then it would just probably feel really funny. And so it kind of starts out, you're playing with a lot of perspective, where this puzzle game
video listeners right there saw that painted chess piece was pretty damn cool.
Yeah, some things are secretly paint, which throws you for a loop, but a lot of it is like, okay, you pick up this block and it's this size, but depending on where you hold it, the perspective makes it look bigger or smaller, and then when you can manipulate it so now it is that. So like you're taking a lot of like tiny little chess pieces that are chess piece size, but if you hold them close to you, they look big, and now suddenly they just are that big. And like you get this little tiny cheese, and then you can make the cheese huge, and now it's like a massive ramp to get up to higher places. And so it kind of starts like that. And I would say, if I had a complaint, to kind of like tutorial feeling section is a bit long, because it sort of gets you to reiterate the same puzzle quite a few times. And I kind of got worried maybe about like half an hour in that, like, okay, is this like what we're going to be doing for 2 hours? Because like I'm kind of good on making big. Like more cheese is just always going to be better, right? But the game expands out tremendously. Like it's kind of chaptered into different concepts. You start with like the guy's perspective, and then you get another one sort of like abstract. So for example, like there's like certain painted rooms, and you need to get something to put on a switch, and you don't have anything that you can interact with. And then you realize that if you stand a certain way, the way that like paintings and like certain parts of the environment line, it makes it look like it's a cube. And so when you're looking at it from that perspective, it becomes a cube, and you can now pick it up as if it's like the interactable object.
Yeah, right. Because what is true from your perspective is true within the rules of the game. Basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's definitely some light bulb moments like that where you go like, oh, hang on. Yeah. Fantastic. And I mean, and I would say like that felt like a big moment at the time. And that is like nothing when it comes to the terms of the scope of this game and how outrageously creative and mind-bending it is. Like you go into some areas that just like, we were sitting on the couch and something would happen and all of us would be like gasping. Like we were reacting to this game as if we were like at a football stadium and like our team just scored the winning goal. We go in and we're like, oh my god.
That is pretty cool. That's pretty cool. It must be fun to play this collaboratively as well, because I'm thinking back to like when I played Maquette and trying to solve those puzzles. Like I got stuck quite a few times because I was just like, it is mind bending, right? And when you only have one person's perspective, it's kind of tough to break your way of thinking when you get stuck on like, what is the solution? So I feel like it's a fun setting you've played this game in as well.
Yeah, I really recommend this to be played socially. Part of it is like there's a spectacle element, and so when you go into a place that just blows your mind in terms of like, like now the floor is the ceiling, and now like you're walking on the walls, and like all this crazy stuff is happening. Like it's just nice to, so it's like watching an action movie with someone, and you're just sort of like caught up in the spectacle. But then like you said, yeah, with the puzzle elements, it's so nice because sometimes like if you're playing alone, I find I tend to have patience for finishing puzzles, and not that I'm like getting mad, but I try things, and I'm more likely to consider looking up a solution.
Oh, I look up a bunch of solutions when I play by myself.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I do think if you can figure it out without resorting to that, it feels satisfying.
Yeah.
And so if I'm playing alone, I'll try a few things. I'll try to think about it, like maybe go make a cup of tea, take a small break, figure it out. I'm just gonna. But playing together, we had times where we were stuck, but we didn't look anything up or I think we looked at one thing at the very end, which was convoluted. But for the most part, one person would click, like one person would get it. And then the next time we were stuck, someone else would click and be like, oh, hang on. And there was even a funny time where we were doing this one puzzle that's called, I won't spoil what it is, but it's called the dollhouse section of the game, which is very, very interesting when you figure out how that works. and how you manipulate yourself instead of the environment around you,
Yeah.
in terms of perspective. But we were doing it with a solution that would work. Like, we were able to manipulate it in a certain, like, what we were doing was really, really difficult to do, like, just mechanically, because we had to line things up in a specific way. And then we're like, we've been trying this, we've almost gotten it to work, we know it can work. And then one of us goes like, oh, hang on, what if we just did this? And it like eliminated 8 steps out of our like 9-step plan to make this work, because it was just such a more simple solution to the puzzle. And we're like, oh, okay, like we've been doing this for 15 minutes, we've just done it in 2 seconds now.
Amazing.
And so that was kind of like a portion that wouldn't necessarily happen on your own.
So how long did it take you guys to finish this then? It's pretty short.
So I think it took us about 3.5 hours, all things told. Like, I think we started it late, around maybe like 11 o'clock, and went till 2:30. So about 3.5 hours, which I think is like a perfect kind of. I think the pacing of this game is good. It's a bit slow at the beginning, so I say like if you're not fully enraptured, just give it time, because it will pick up and will enthrall you. But you might find that first half an hour just be like they're hammering it in a little more than I think.
Gotcha.
But in addition to that, there's kind of like a mystery element of like why you're here in this test in the first time, and there's like almost a couple sections that are a bit like scary. Like it's a little bit creepy at one point, where you feel like you're sort of, and there's a lot going on, and the ending sort of sums up, which is, it's not a story driven game, I would say. But the end sort of sums it up with like a really nice message about like how important perspective is just in your general life, and about how, like, if you really believe you can do something, you can do something. Like, the limitations you put are like on yourself, and it just kind of came out of left field with this really like positive commentary. But then looking back on it, it was definitely reinforced by the gameplay, and it felt earned. And so the scope of this game is a lot bigger.
It just pulls the door off there. It's awesome.
Yeah,
that's cool.
There's a lot of funny little things like that.
You've convinced me, and just watching this now, I'm definitely gonna play this year. If for nothing else, just because the way you're describing the game in terms of like the manipulating of yourself, even in the dollhouse, like there's a lot of parallels between this and Maquette. Like, they're very aligned in terms of what you're doing. The difference was Maquette's a little longer, and it does have like an explicit narrative. So I'm interested to play this and see which one I prefer. And I think it'd be fun if we both swapped and then did a little comparison.
That is, this part here. Oh my God. For anyone watching, when you go down this hallway and then the hallway's like way fucking
Oh my
longer.
God. Whoa, crazy. Okay, I gotta stop watching this because I'm gonna play.
Yeah, you gotta stop. You're gonna start spoiling it. But yeah, what's funny is the second we beat this game, I turned to them like, we're gonna play Maquette. Like, yeah, that is our next game that we're playing together, is Maquette, because of how much we enjoyed Superliminal. So
good.
I've already concocted that bet that you've just put out to me, but
the Maquette, yeah, something like that. Okay. All right.
We'll workshop that.
We'll work on it. While we workshop that, let me tell you about what I've been playing. I want to give a big thank you to my friend Brandon, who sent me a lovely little game for Christmas this year. And this is Gato Roboto, everybody. A lovely little game from Doinksoft, one of the greatest publisher names you could possibly hear. And Gato Roboto is a fun little Metroidvania game where you play as a cat in a mech suit. So how can it get any better than that? I pretended I was Neville the whole time I was playing the game. Although this cat's name
right now, and he looks delighted.
That's right. This cat's name is Kiki, though. But yeah, Gato Roboto is a really little bite-sized. It took me about 3 hours to beat it. Just a fun little game to play in a couple of sittings. And it's a Metroidvania. I mean, through and through. It's a very pared down one, which I really liked. It was short and snappy. And sometimes these games, I know you were talking to me about Metroid Dread and you hadn't played for a little while and you're like, oh, where do I go? And this game has a map, but you don't really get lost because it's so short and bite-sized. You kind of get through it. You're in and out, and you understand the game so well while you're playing, which I really appreciated. And the mech has the standard kind of powers. You have your little laser gun. You get some missile power-ups. You also get a kind of double jump where you can bounce on enemies' heads, which is kind of interesting because you can sort of use it to platform as well as in combat. And the unique, I guess, the one unique kind of aspect, because the mech does have sort of a standard Metroidvania sort of, control scheme, is that the crux of it is you can get out of the suit and play as the cat or the mech. So there's not really a morph ball adjacent ability, but you can get out of the suit. And so the mech, of course, has the weapons. You have a health bar. You get your, your offense from the mech. But then when you play as the cat, you can come out of the suit, and the cat can go in water and swim. The mech will get damaged by water.
Okay. So, question then for you:
Mhm.
it's kind of intended that in like this room you're the cat, this room you're the mech. Is it
Yeah.
much of a choice, or is it kind of like this area is for cat?
No,
this
it's
area
not a choice. It's more like a sort of a puzzle type of thing. So
Right.
you'll go into a room. There'll be a locked door, and then there'll be like a little gap in the wall. So you've obviously got to get out of your mech, become the cat, climb up the wall because the cat can climb walls, get through the little
Right.
gap, solve a little challenge as the cat, and then the way they do it is when you come to a save point, the little test tube comes down, and the mech suit will respawn. So you can go somewhere else as the cat and get your suit back.
Okay.
Or there'll be like other sections where, like right here, you see anyone watching on a video, you got to come down here as the cat and go through this little
Right.
maze.
The
And
mech
then
is too
eventually there'll be a save point, you'll get your suit back, kind of thing. So they switch it up. There's some little areas where you got to do, go back and forth and kind of unlock and drag the mech across on some little platforms and whatnot. It's pretty cool. Nothing really like groundbreaking, I guess, but it's just a really solid Metroidvania. There's a cute little story where you kind of crash land on a planet, and the cat's owner, I guess, he was on the spaceship, and he gets sort of stuck in the wreckage, and so that's why you're the cat, and you're going out trying to like find a way to rescue him. There's a fun little plot with a little mouse enemy and whatnot. And the game itself is pretty short. Like I said, it's not too challenging. I mean, if you've played other Metroidvanias before, I would say you'll get through this one without too much of a problem. Although what I will say is I really enjoyed the final portion of the game. There's a bit of I wouldn't say it's like a difficulty spike, but there's definitely like a little gauntlet you go through at the end of the game, which is like, okay, you understand this game, you've made it through, but let's challenge your skills here for 5-10 minutes. And that was a lot of fun to go through. And I really liked that little change up at the end. When I got to it. So that was fun. You can 100% this game, I think, in just a couple hours. There's the collectibles, you can get health tanks. And then the other thing you collect is little cassette tapes, which are aesthetically, you can change the graphic style of the game. So instead of being black and white, you can do like different color schemes, similar to Downwell. If anyone's played that, you can unlock the different palettes there. So you can do like a red and blue. I was playing like a nice cream and navy blue style. Like, oh, it looked good. Yeah.
That is really cool. That is, I had not heard of this or the other game. That honestly, like, is probably my favorite part of this. Is I was thinking, like, I like the very minimal
Mhm.
black and white. And
Yeah, it really looks
very-
like Mega Man 2 or like those old style kind of Mega Man games for anyone watching, like
Yeah.
blocky and like those type of
Mhm.
graphics. But here's one of the
Yeah, with
boss
like a
fights
little bit
here.
of shading, so it looks nice. But the idea of being able to change colors, like something about that, like that's a cool, tangible reward. It's not just like I have 30 feathers or I have this like
Yeah.
collectible and like it gives me like a bit of like something to read. Like changing the whole color of the game is a cool idea.
Yeah, it's like a fun little thing, right? Like you say, it adds a little something, and like it just swaps the colors. Nothing major, of course, but kind of cool. And but yeah, Gato Roboto. I mean, it's cheap too. If you're looking for a little Metroidvania, you want to do a little change up. Like I beat God of War. I'm planning to start some other bigger games soon. This was like a perfect little palate cleanser. Those 5 hours or
Mhm.
less, tight little experiences, get in and out. Beautiful game. Totally recommend it. And first game beaten this year for me, Kate. Gato Roboto.
Nice. That's awesome. And Superliminal was the same for me, technically, at 2:30 on January 1st.
Technically.
First game. I played I mean, if we started at 11, finished at 2:30, the majority of the game was a 2023 for me.
This
and
is
I'm
true.
counting
This
that.
is true. Put it on your list.
Yeah,
All right,
time to
everybody.
beat the first one.
That's right. All right. Well, before we get to the end of the show here, we do have, as always, listener mail, where we have a very unique submission this week. And without any further ado, I guess I'll just let you take it from there.
Right. So this is a listener submission from last week that I built upon and thought the inverse was fun. So last week we had a really fun question, which was like, what would be the best desert island game? Like if you were stuck on a desert island, like what's the best game that you could bring with you? And we had a lot of fun talking about that. And then after the episode, we were kind of joking around about it. And the idea of the inverse question popped in my head is what would be the worst game to bring with you? Like, if you're stuck on an island and you could only have one video game, what is the worst game that you could pick?
So we were,
And I think,
yeah.
I
So
think
after
in
the
some ways
episode,
this is more fun.
after the episode, we were talking about this just like after we had stopped recording, and it was just a joke. And the first thing that came to my head was like, oh, it's Florence. Like it's a short little game. Like it's an amazing game. Everyone go play Florence, but like it's so short and it's so emotional. There's like almost no mechanics. It's like, it would be horrible to just replay over and over again. Like it would be horrible. We were laughing so much. And then it was your idea to use this as our listener mail question for the week. And it couldn't have gone any better. So we do have some listener responses actually from Twitter and from a couple friends as well. I think you said you had some people, right? But
yeah, so I'll maybe start with that because it was a good friend of the show, Jonah, who proposed the desert island question in the first place. And so I obviously had to follow with him, like, what would be the worst desert island game? And he gave me possibly the funniest answer I could have ever thought of. So shout out to Jonah, and also congratulations on beating Plague Tale Requiem. You beat James.
Congratulations,
and,
Jonah.
We've been crying about it together for the last day, and I appreciate that. I'm not alone. But he said the worst desert island game to bring is Doki Doki Literature Club.
That is a bad one.
Which is bad. The thing about that game is it's like kind of interesting the first time, right? Where you get through all the twists and turns. But then it's just like a really cringy, like
yeah,
cringy game that like, you know what the twist is.
100%. And narratively, like it's not like you could improve at the mechanics or like practice, like you're just reading. So that's a bad one.
Exactly. It is a bad one, but just something about it being like a sad kind of like cringy dating sim / like, you know, twisty game is not
it's a bad combo. We also had some responses on Twitter here to our tweet, which is funny. Our mom replied and she said Tony Hawk and tagged you, which is maybe the greatest response of all time.
I think that is the greatest thing that has ever come out of this podcast is my mom flaming me for Tony Hawk.
That is amazing.
But honestly, she's right. That is the worst game you could possibly bring definitively. But you know, we'll entertain some other ideas just in case.
Yeah. James Holiday wrote in, said Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. Interesting pick. He must not be a big Zelda fan because I don't know. I think you could do a lot worse than a
Look,
game like
if
that.
you've ever played those, if you've ever done that tutorial of like 45-minute wolf section, you're just gonna sit and play with the sand. Like, no.
Okay. Jazz writes in, says Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, which I know he's really down on those games, and I mean they've got their issues, but man, there's a lot to do in that game. It might be good to have on a desert island, honestly. And then we have friend of the show, Mr. Del Monster, our previous guest, who's outing himself as have never having played Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons, because he's saying this game is a multiplayer game. So my friend Mike, I'm putting you on blast. Not only are you getting called out for this, but now you have to play Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons because you owe it to yourself to play that masterpiece of a game. So, and realize you can do so by yourself. But he also mentioned Sonic 06, which is a great shout for one of the worst games you could possibly bring to a desert island. So you redeemed yourself a bit on that. Oh,
so, James, then what? So we've had some bad options. Like these are pretty rough, and Florence might still be winning. Did you have anything other than Florence, or you solidified
I still think Florence is the worst. Just putting myself, I'm thinking Sonic 06, right? That game sucks, but at least there would be some kind of like morbidly like, oh, I wonder if I can beat this without falling through the ground and like trying to get through the game. You could kill some hours playing that. Florence is just so short. I really think it is the worst, but I thought of something that could be potentially just as bad. So I'll tell you. My honorable mention actually for this was Erica, because I thought like, the potential of having to have your game system and your phone, it just makes it so like there's more potential to get sand in either one of those and it doesn't work. So you couldn't play it.
You can break it easy.
Because you need two devices. So I thought that was a bad one.
Right.
It's also narrative, like, not so great to replay. But no, there's something worse. Here's the worst game, Kate, and I'm interested to see what you think. So remember back on PS Plus, I played a game called Stranded Deep, which was about surviving on a desert island. And that game had a bunch of kind of like janky mechanics. Like I remember getting stuck in my raft, one time and I couldn't really pull it over and some weird things. But I thought about it, and like, what would be worse than being stuck on a desert island and you're like chopping down wood and you're like trying to build a fire and like get some shelter and like hunt for some food, you know, like you're desperately trying to survive, and then you get your couple hours in the evening, you're trying to relax, you're like, fuck, I just want to kick back and enjoy myself. You boot up the one thing you bring with you, and what do? You do the same activities again in a video game.
Oh my god. That is so funny. That genuinely might actually
Like, that
be
would
the worst
suck.
game you could possibly
That would
bring.
suck.
That would be so horrific.
You'd have no leisure
That
time.
is like a like sick twisted joke. Like that is like rolling the boulder up a hill for all of eternity level, like sick and twisted.
Totally right. Like,
Terrible
not only am I
joke.
starving, but I turn on Stranded Deep and my character is starving, and now I'm just having a bad time 2 times in a row.
That is so funny. I think your submission is better than mine. But I think I did come up with a funny answer. And I know a lot of people like this game and this series, so it's maybe not definitively the worst, but I tried to think what would be the worst for me. And my qualifications were like, it's already got to be a bad game, and it's got to be a game that like sucks to replay, so that you can't even like you said with like Sonic 06, like at least you can kind of give yourself like self-imposed challenges, or like I'll see how fast I can do this level.
Exactly.
Like,
You could try and
there's
speed run it, right? Or
something-
something like that.
yeah, there's something you can do to motivate yourself to like want to put some time into it. But I thought the worst game that I could bring is the original Five Nights at Freddy's. Because like
What?
you just sit there. It's so weird. But like you just sit there, right? And you like, it doesn't really have a story. It's just those like stupid mechs. And like a horror game sucks because the whole thing about the horror game is like it's only scary at the beginning when you play it, right? Because like eventually like, the monster catches you, like you do the jump scare and it's no longer scary. So you play Five Nights at Freddy's and yeah, you get like jump scared by the stupid like bear guy who is that Freddy? I don't know.
I don't know,
You get scared
actually.
by
Let me
that
look it
guy.
up.
And then, you know, it's no longer scary. There is zero value to the game, which was already like a pretty gimmicky, shitty game to begin with.
His name is Freddy Fazbear.
Yeah, so like what does Freddy Fazbear have to offer you out like once you've played this game like twice?
That's true. A horror game is a
Like-
great nomination because you really just lose all impact once you know what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And this is a horror game that like doesn't really have a story or mechanics. It's just looking at like surveillance monitors. It would be terrible.
It would be terrible. I mean, yeah, those are some bad picks. Some bad picks for sure. Stranded Deep, I mean, there's a lot to do in that game. You could get a lot out of it. It's just the repetitive
It's
activities.
the mental, yeah, it is the cruel joke that your life has turned into.
Wow. Great responses all around, though. I still think Florence takes the cake. It's just something about replaying that game endlessly every day for entertainment. Is
Right,
just
when
so
you
fun.
like when you it's kind of, I guess, like a horror game when you know like the emotional gut punch of the story and then
Yeah.
you like watch it 6 times, like
Mhm,
yeah,
mhm.
it just loses all sense of what the point is.
That's right.
But at least Florence is good. That's the one thing it's got for it. At least it's good to begin with.
There we go. Well, that's listener mail, everybody, and that's the show. So if you would like to write in listener mail and be really cool, like Kate did for this episode, you can do so to CloudControlPod at proton.me or get in touch with us on Twitter or anywhere else you're listening to the show. Write in your questions and comments, and we would love to read them out and answer them just like we did today. And like we said at the top of the show, thank you all for listening and supporting the show. We really appreciate it. And yeah, that's going to close us out for the show today. So thank you all very much for listening. We'll be back next week. And until then, this has been Cloud Control, the gaming podcast that's not just good, it's good enough. See you next week, everybody.